Hello and welcome to the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg-Shaped, and him, Mr. Excitable with the words, it's all happening, the one and the only editor extraordinaire, Gavin Harper. Hello, boss, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
Yeah, good. It's Christmas time. It feels like an advent calendar. It's just, the teams begin to get announced. You got a Friday night game, you got a Saturday. It just starts to build and people are talking about it. It's in the news. This is a time to shine. I just hope it's a cracker.
Oh, me too. Like, it's all just bubbling away now, and I think probably all of us are just looking forward to 8 o'clock on Friday night to watch France-Wales, but 2 o'clock on Saturday to see how Scotland got on.
I'm a fan of the Friday night thing. I think I would love to see. I'd love to see us have a crack at that in Murrayfield, but that's for another day. For me, it's a nice thing. I think we get to watch what should be a cracker to kick off
Friday night. Friday night's definitely better than a Sunday.
Sundays.
Friday night under the light in any of the Six Nations grounds is a proper spectacle. Sunday afternoon feels like an afterthought.
Yes, I'm not a fan of Sundays. Italy last year bit us in the backside. We were both there. We met up in the piazza the day before and disappeared into the night. And then we turned up thinking, right, here it's going to happen. And then Italy bite us in the backside. So it's an interesting couple of selections. Not a huge number of question marks in the Scotland squad, but Italy, there's still names there that we're not familiar with, but are pretty tasty.
Yeah, but there are names there that you now look at across like 1 to 15, and like I'm worried. I think when I saw the team, I thought that's particularly the back line. I thought that's a pretty handy Italian team. Look, they beat Scotland last year. They are a good side. They should have beat France in France last year. They'll fancy this, I think, on Saturday. No Sione, obviously, for Scotland. I'm glad that this game's at Murrayfield. That makes me feel a wee bit more relaxed. But I still think it's an awful lot tougher a start than a lot of people probably think it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted because, my knowledge of this squad is not that flash, but we've got a special guest joining us who has quite an Italian sounding name. So I'm probably going to leave the pronunciation to you to bring in our special guest, but we wanted to get a bit of insight into this Italian squad. So who do you bring in but a boy for Strathpeffer?
Yes, indeed. The one and only Alasdair Mackenzie.
There you go, Alasdair Mackenzie. I just wanted to make sure we got the pronunciation there. Alasdair, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, imagine what it's like living in Rome with this name. Just think about that for a second. Yeah, I do actually have to go around calling myself Alessandro Moretti to people so that they stand a chance of being able to, understand me in some way. Gaelic names don't go down particularly well.
Well, it's great to have you with us, and I'm keen to know more. Now, Gav's already mentioned that backline. Tommaso Allen at 15, is he happy again?
How do you mean?
Well, it feels like there's been a bit of a roller coaster there. He obviously, I'm guessing his favourite position's 10. But Garbisi is now nailed on first choice, but he's too good not to have in the team. Play at 15. He had time away. Are we going to see the best of him?
I think he's, I think Alan has always been a player who kind of serves a very particular purpose for Italy, which is generally to be a second playmaker. Kind of how that's worked in the team has changed over the years, and I think he's never quite managed to make that 10 shirt his own, even if it is his favorite position. And he's played at 15 quite a bit for Italy. I think that the reason that he's there this time around, especially having heard what Gonzalo Quesada had to say earlier at the team announcement, is basically that they've got this idea. They start slowly in the Six Nations, Italy, and it's been a problem for them. Quesada said he learned a lot from last year when he's been used to club coaching, having a lot more time with players, and he was kind of shocked how little time he actually got to prepare last year, because obviously you kind of set up a camp and then a whole load of them leave to go and play over the weekend. And the way he put it was they're not really mentally available until a few days before the game. And so he said at the launch last week when I spoke to him, he said that they're going to basically come to Edinburgh with a really simple game plan. And I think that's a big part of the reason Alan's in there, is that they are basically going to be kicking the ball up in the air a lot and seeing if Scotland's aerial game is up to the challenge. They have a plan, quite an obvious plan B, which he mentioned himself, which is if Simone Jesi comes off the bench onto the wing and Capuozzo moves to fullback, it's suddenly a far more electric, speedy, attacking kind of looking back line than it is with Alan there. But I do think that a big part of the reason they've selected him is essentially to tie in with that more simplified game plan he's talking about.
It's interesting because Gavin and I have spoken about Ireland going aerial against Scotland. When you look at that backline, you mentioned Capuzzo, Ione is obviously dangerous, but the centre partnership is very literally strong, but also rugby strong. What's your thoughts on the competition there? Obviously, Sione is now not available, so it's Stafford and Hugh Jones. What's your thoughts in that centre battle?
Yeah, it's interesting. Menoncello and Brex have, last year kind of managed to establish themselves, I would say, as one of the best partnerships going, to be honest. I did an interview with Menoncello this week, which I've been given permission to flog shamelessly here. So you can read it on Rugby Pass. It was quite interesting because he doesn't speak much English, so he's not done many interviews as a result. So I was able to go to their training camp in Rome and chat to him and get to know him a little bit. And he is quite a quiet, shy guy, but with huge ambition. I mean, he was talking pretty openly about how he wants to be one of the best centres in the world. He wants to be one of the best Italian players ever, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be targeting these things because, he became the Six Nations youngest ever try scorer on his debut, and then he's been the youngest Italian ever to win this Player of the Tournament award last year. He's still only 22. I did ask him about Tuipulotu being out, but he didn't really bite. He was kind of saying, the old, it doesn't really matter who I'm up against. They're going to have a plan defensively to adapt to deal with all of this. But it is that is something that does worry me slightly from a Scottish perspective, is the fact that our biggest loss is directly opposite their biggest threat. Because Menoncello can do. I mean, Brex is also a great player, but I think Menoncello is a seriously good player who can damage us in plenty of ways, and he can do a lot. He's quick, he's strong, he can kick. He's played a lot on the wing as well, so he's a very dynamic player. So that is a big test first up for Stafford, because I really rate Stafford as an inside centre, but obviously there'll be a lot of eyes on him because of the guy he's replacing. And like I say, I think Menoncello he looks ready to kind of step up to this challenge now with so much more attention now on him.
Yeah, it's going to be a cracker of battle. How much longer Sebastian Negri got? Scotland have picked Jamie Ritchie with Dempsey to come on. Negri obviously brings a heap of experience. How important is he in that pack?
Yeah, I mean, that back row is pretty nailed on for a while now. He's just your classic enforcer, isn't he, Negri? I mean, you can see anyone who's watched the Netflix documentary, and he's obviously someone who's been featured heavily in that, as well as just how much commitment he has physically to throwing himself at everything. I don't know. I mean, they do have options there now. So although that's been nailed on, they've gone for this 6-2 bench against Scotland, which is quite interesting. They didn't do that against us last year, but they did do it in 3 other games. And it tended to be the games where they felt like they're going to get a bit more of a physical battle. Ireland, England, and I think France, that they went for it. So Negri's probably going to get told, go out there and absolutely clatter people for 50 minutes or so, and then they're going to roll on Ross Vincent and Manuel Zuliani, who's still a guy who I don't think has got much attention or been given much credit outside of Italy, but he has been performing really well for a couple of years now, and he's just unfortunate that he's got Lamaro ahead of him for club and country. But he's a hell of a player who can make an impact too, and Lamaro can play 6 or 8 as well. So it's a long-winded way of saying they've got a lot of physicality and quite a few options in that pack beyond Negri. But I do think he is in there to go around smashing people.
Alasdair, I think one of the things that interests me, and probably not that many other people, is the sort of battle up front. Fischetti, Nicotera, Ferrari feels like about as strong as Quesada could have gone, but having somebody like Marco Riccioni on the bench is sort of testament to Italy's increased strength and depth. Is that, would you go along with that? That it feels like they've moved on a long way from the days of somebody like Martin Castrogiovanni having to play 80 minutes and being so important.
Yeah, I think so. I think that shows across most of the squad. But you're right. In the front row, I think in particular has been a bit light in recent years. Even while they've been developing and improving as a team, they have struggled at scrum time quite often. Yeah. They are missing Mirko Spagnuolo though, because he got a suspension in the Zebre Benetton game, and he's out for the first 2 Six Nations matches. So that this selection they've got is without a guy who would usually be in there. And Luca Rizzoli is on the bench, who I have not seen much of, so I can't really give you much insight there. But he's a debutant. He's only 22, so perhaps that they are a bit light in that regard there. But I think in general the squad depth has improved. It's still not on a level with the other teams in the Six Nations, I would say, with probably the exception of Wales, who've clearly got their own issues going on. But but I think, and the hookers as well, really strong couple of hooker options, who I think are still a bit underrated.
What's the feeling in Italy, Alasdair? We're still probably thinking France and Ireland to win the whole thing. England are getting better. Scotland always think we're going to win the Grand Slam every year. What are Italy thinking is realistic? What's their target?
Well, there's nobody's kind of, I would say, getting ahead of themselves because of what happened last year. There is a realization that, not that it's all for nothing, but that you are throwing away a lot of progress if you can't back that up. That doesn't mean that they necessarily need to go and get 2 wins and a draw again. I think the most important thing especially within the camp, is that they're competing, and in a way that every match they're at least in it. Even if they're not getting results every time, they are on the cusp of getting a result. And that they're showing that's a level that they're able to compete at competitively on a consistent basis. They do have 3 home games this year, so I do think that does up the ante a little bit in terms of expectation. Like I say, I think they probably wouldn't have wanted to have Scotland first, because they tend to start slowly, and they will see that as one of the games to target. And then they've got Wales second as well. So this is a really big test of can they get out of that slow start pattern and be really competing and getting good results right from the start. Because Wales at home is now a game that they will feel that they have to win, really. But it's still not something they're used to. You know, there's been so much talk around the improvement of the national team, and they're getting all these big scalps in the last few years. But we still come back to the fact that game you guys, I was there too in Rome last year. It was so emotional when the full-time whistle went, and you know, there's kind of bodies everywhere and people in tears and stuff. And I moved here in 2018, and I've covered every single Italy home game in Rome since then. And my God, it felt for me like an eternity. I knew it'd be against Scotland, by the way. It was so annoying, but
didn't we all?
It has been 11 years. You know, 11 years is a long time to wait to see a home win. So it's still not something they're used to. And
I watched the start of the first episode of the Netflix documentary, and the Cannoni brothers, and I can't repeat it because we're a PG audience, but they said about Italy haven't won forever, and one of them goes, for sake. You know, it must hurt the players. I mean, they want to win, and you know, the boys at Benetton are now getting used to winning. How do you feel when you speak to individuals? You know, you're talking about Menicello, who wants to be the best. How do they feel about being involved in a team that, unfortunately, the expectation isn't that they're going to win very many?
Well, I think that they are changing the way they talk about that a bit. I spoke to Michele Lamero at this launch as well, and I asked him about that. The fact that he'd been doing, because he's now the most experienced Six Nations captain of the lot, because he's been doing it for 4 years in a row. So I said, what's it like? You've been doing this every year, and this is the first time that people will be asking you about something other than how long it's been since you lost either at home or since you won a game at home or away, because they just had that stat hanging over them for so long that it would always be something that comes up. And he basically said it's something that he's really proud of, but it can lead either to people feeling far too much pressure as a result of that, or to hyper confidence, was the way he put it. So it's, I think it's still something they're kind of getting used to, but they do feel like a team that will win games now. And I think that mentioning Benetton is really important, because so many is kind of like the Glasgow Scotland thing. It's a big part of what can give us hope as Scotland fans this year, is that we've actually got winners in that team now who've gone to South Africa and won that URC final. That is so encouraging from a national team perspective, just because the whole core of that team is there. And Benetton will see it, Italy will see it the same way with Benetton, whose achievements haven't been on that level, but they are still creating history all the time. And that win against La Rochelle and reaching the Champions League knockout stages, first Italian team, getting to the URC quarterfinals. And, they're not a team. Zebri kind of still are a team that are always getting pumped, regardless of this result, the amazing result they've just had. But with Benetton, it's not been like that for quite a few years now. So they have, I think, learned how to close out games and learned what it feels like to win matches and how you need to do that. And although you'll still get those kind of jokes, I do think that they don't believe that they're eternal losers in the way that, 3 or 4 years ago when Franco Smith was here as coach, it was really pretty bleak back then, because he came in and saw the state of things and he went, right, I'm just going to promote the under-20s because it's the only way forward here. And they got absolutely destroyed in that period. But I think Franco is absolutely right to do it, because look at the players that he threw in at that point. They're all now, approaching 50 caps and have been a key part of all this. So, yeah, a long-winded answer, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, but I think what I mean is they're getting used to the idea of being winners. They're not there yet where they feel like they will win every match they're involved in, but I think they're getting used to it.
So the ever-improving Italian rugby team is all down to the Glasgow Warriors head coach. That's what you're telling us, Alasdair?
Well, I think his record as Italy coach is pretty brutal, to be honest. So perhaps we wouldn't go that far, but yeah, I mean, certainly he did. He threw in a lot of these guys, Varney and Gabisi and Lamero and a whole bunch of the under-20s team. and I think he could see the mixture of the fact that he wasn't going to get anywhere by continuing with the status quo, but also that that generation of talent who have come through the pathways, elite pathways that have done so well in creating all these players and getting all these, the age grade teams have been doing really well for quite a number of years now as well. So yeah, it was that kind of sink or swim thing, and obviously they did get some pretty difficult results in that time, but in the long run, it seems to have helped.
Yeah, it certainly does. Bruce, at the very start of this, described these couple of days as like Advent calendar days before it all kind of kicks off. What's that like in Italy? It's obviously such a football-dominated country, but has there been, does the Six Nations now have that kind of cut through? What's the kind of general atmosphere like in Rome?
No, not really. It's in Rome you see it a bit more because it's where the games are hosted. So you'll see a lot of there's a lot of ad boards up, like all over the metro at the moment is painted in pictures of Italian rugby players. You've got huge billboards around the city and stuff trying to promote the games. The good thing is they are selling out matches again. I mean, there was a period a few years ago, like we were just talking about with Franco's kind of time, was when the crowd stopped coming, and that was when things got really concerning. I mean, they didn't stop, but there were a lot more empty seats than there used to be. Whereas now, I think the Ireland game's already sold out, and the other two are getting there fast as well. And this is a massive stadium in a non-rugby playing city, in a non-rugby playing country. So it's very localized, the areas of rugby interest in Italy. And as a result, in the national coverage, no, you don't really see much about it. Main sports papers, you get Gazzetta, Corriere, so on. You'll never really see a mention of rugby on the front page unless something absolutely extraordinary has happened. And even then, it'll be more of a box than a front page. And so, yeah, that's why, and that's a big part of the challenge here. It's a minority sport, of course, in Scotland too, but not to the same extent and not with the same kind of competition of other sports. And, the Menoncello story is kind of amazing because of just how fortuitous it was, because he only started playing rugby because his football club went bust. So he grew up playing football like anyone else. The difference was he's from Treviso. So he's from the one rugby playing town in Italy, basically. And so his dad, he was saying, dad came home with a flyer for a rugby camp in the next town along. And they sent him along to go and give it a shot. And then, the rest is history. So they need kind of more of that, but you can't rely on kind of people from small towns in the Veneto to make up a national team necessarily. So it doesn't have that massive cut through yet. And but I do think results are helping. And we've seen that even in the broadcast rights. For example, when I first moved here, it was on these completely forgettable channels hidden away somewhere, and now this year it's going to be on both Sky Sports and on Rai, which is the national broadcaster like the Italian BBC. So they're going to get more eyeballs on the sport and on the competition from that too.
Awesome, sounds good. Come on then, Alasdair, before we let you go, what's your prediction?
I was really hoping you weren't going to ask me this. I don't know. I'm flying back tomorrow to come and watch this game, so I really hope they're not going to let me down. I do think that Scotland should win it, but I think it might be a bit tight. So I'd say Scotland by 5. Let's go with that.
Do you know what? I'll take that, Alasdair.
Do you need an exact score?
No, I'll take that. I just need to hear you see Scotland win because you know what's going on in Italy, so maybe that's a bit more reassuring. Alasdair, brilliant to see you. Safe travels, and I hope you enjoy it. And thank you for tuning in.
Cheers, guys. All the best.
Thanks, Alasdair.
Class. Has that made you feel better? Our
Yes.
Italian expert thinks Scotland are going to win. Has that calmed the nerves a bit?
Absolutely. I feel 100% calmer. Alasdair's put me at ease. Scotland are going to win. I'm going to stick an extra 10 points on his prediction and say Scotland by 15 based on nothing other than Alasdair's filled me with confidence, and that's it.
We'll take it. Well, we spoke about the Italian backline. The Scottish backline, I think, has picked itself. There's no real surprise. Gregor has backed Stafford to take Sione's shirt there, so there's no massive surprise. If that backline can get ball, I know that centre partnership for Italy is good. The back three's reasonably strong. I'm really interested to see how Capuzzo defends, because he's right up against Duhan, and if we're talking about an aerial battle, you would think Duhan wins that, but Capuzzo's athletic, he's skillful, he's determined. That one's going to be interesting.
Yeah, he's going to get, like, if that's the way Italy are going to play, and I think the selection suggests that it definitely is, they are going to go I would think they'll go pretty hard after Duhan in the air.
But then if you flip it, Darcy's wee and Ione's a monster. So yeah, it's eeksy peeksy on either wing. But I still back both of ours. I would back Duhan with ball in hand, and I'd back Darcy with ball in hand. But ball in the air does make it a bit more interesting.
So I think you're totally right. Here's an interesting question we've been posed: what Italian players would make the Scotland starting 15?
And I know, but we're biased. We have this local bias. Menicello. If it was Sione, no, but maybe Menicello. But Stafford's class. I think Jones is better than Brex.
But it's not a foregone conclusion now that you say it's 15 Scotland players or 14 Scotland players, and 10 years ago we'd have been saying 14 Scotland players and Parisi. Now you can actually go through them and make a case for, Menicello, Brex, Capozzo, Ioane. Like, you could make a case for all of that backline, probably apart from Tommy Allen, Lamaro. You talked about Negri earlier, Ruzza. Like, some of these guys, Fischetti, like, these guys are.
It's far more of a battle. Like, if you take it individual against individual, it's a tougher shift. What we hope is our experience and partnerships and is going to be stronger. Like, I'm desperate keen to see Blair, because he's kind of out of sight, out of mind for me, because I don't watch what goes on in France. So I hope he can tear it up and just show everybody what he's up to and how he's going about things. We all want to see Darcy and Duhan with their paws on the ball, Finn orchestrating things. The positions where we've spoken about are what's he going to do at 9, and I don't think there's any surprises there. Ben White's his first choice, and George Horne is the man in possession of the Glasgow shirt, so he jumps Dobie.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think, we talked about this at the weekend or at the start of the week. I think the minute you go 5 and 3 on the bench, George Horne's your man. The only question would be, if Townsend had gone 6-2 as Italy have, Dobie probably gets in because he's got that wee bit more versatility. I think you're right. There's not huge surprises in the Scotland team. Even the one, Jamie Ritchie at 6, you look at it and say, well, I'm pretty comfortable with that. I feel like Dempsey's been on the bench. Dempsey's on the bench because he's only managed one game for Glasgow since the autumn. Again, given the injuries to Bayliss, Noambi Christie, I think I'm pretty relaxed about that sort of, that Gregor's gone that way. I think the second row, Johnny Gray and Gilchrist, I worry a wee bit that neither has played much rugby neither's played any rugby this year. But I think, you've got two guys have got 150 caps between them. Like, I feel like they'll be fine. Again, I would be, and this is probably unfair on Italy, I would be more worried if we were playing Ireland first and they hadn't played any rugby.
Dave Cherry starting at hooker. You know, we've been round the houses and I've had a lot of chats with people over the last wee while about who starts and who gets picked, and you know the Dave Cherry, Ewan Ashman, with sort of accepting that Johnny Matthews is not in the mix. Paddy Harrison probably isn't in the mix at the moment. But then your point the other day was the hookers in the squad are off for Edinburgh. So how do you pick them? But it looks like Dave Cherry's the one nailed on. Set piece important. Let's make sure our line out accuracy is high.
I think that's it. Like I said to you the last time we were on here, I don't think you pick a guy who's just turned 34 to have him play a bit part or play, an insignificant role. Clearly, Dave Cherry's now got a really important role to play with Scotland because I think Gregor has identified the set piece as an area of concern, and they obviously feel like Dave Cherry's the best thrower. Look, I think it's an incredible sort of comeback for him, having been out of the picture for too long.
Huge.
He would have thought that was totally done, I imagine, having not been picked since the World Cup. But no, look, it's a big opportunity, but he's got to take it. He's now got to play well. I think he was the last few times Dave Cherry's played for Scotland, he's done reasonably well. But we talked earlier about Stafford being judged because of the man he's replacing. Because we now know Dave Cherry's in the team for his set piece. If the set piece has wobbles at any point in the Six Nations, people will say, well, I thought he was only in the team because of that. So, it's a fine balance, but I think I feel like Gregor's got the balance of the team right, and there's no great surprises. And actually, I think there's enough on the bench that if, like Alasdair was saying, it could be close. I think if it is, with Rory Sutherland, Ewan Ashman, Dempsey, George Horne, Tom Jordan, Scotland have got enough there on the bench probably to see them through. I think the one area I'm slightly concerned about is Gregor Brown covering the second row and Will Hurd at tight head. But, how many times have we said replacement tight heads in Scotland jerseys are in case of emergencies?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. When you look at that Scotland backline, I think George Horne comes on for Ben White. I think that'll happen. Tom Jordan, I think, will come on for Stafford. I don't think Kyle Rowe will get on. I'm not sure you would change Blair, Darcy, Duan. I'm not sure what the situation will be for him to come on. Now I could be wrong, and maybe I'm doing Kyle Rowe a disservice there, but that backline is full of guys that could play 80 minutes, and you would probably want them to. Up front, I think Xander probably plays until the game is gone either way.
Yeah.
Whether that's at 60 minutes or 70 minutes or 79 minutes, I think Xander plays until the game's done. I think Suz will come on for Pierre. I think Ashley will come on for Dave and be really physical. As we were just hearing, Italy want to be physical. Well, Ashley will come on and he'll put 80 minutes into a 30-minute go. Gregor Brown, I don't know enough about, but what a game to give him that experience. And Dempsey, I think, will come on, and it'll be interesting to see who he comes on for. Does he come on for Matt Fagerson to give him some minutes off, or does he come on for Jamie with the thinking that potentially the back row becomes that Glasgow back row? So there's a lot in the mix there.
Or just to throw a total wild card, does Dempsey come on for Darge and you move one of Matt Fagerson or Richie to 7 because Ireland, I know they've got Josh van der Fleer, and I know that with one eye on Ireland, if you're in that fortunate position You say Ireland have got Ryan Baird at 6 against England, who's a big old unit, Van der Fleer and Caelan Doris. Like, they are 3 pretty physical specimens. So do we need Jamie Ritchie, Matt Fagerson and Jack Dempsey to counteract that? Like, it's, you know, and it's not... Are
you telling me Gregor's not going to pick Darge against Ireland?
It would, put it this way, because Rory Darge is captain or co-captain, I don't think it's out with Gregor's kind of decision-making process to say, I can get that guy out of the team because I've still got
I will buy you dinner if Darge isn't in the starting 15 against Ireland.
We've got it on record. Thanks very much.
If he's fit and available, Rory Darge plays every game for Scotland. You're not telling me, Gregor.
We'll leave that last bit out, and we'll just clip up the first bit.
Nah, no chance. So, any hint to? I mean, Scotland want to play, don't they? And with a backline like that, why wouldn't you? In a back row that can get busy, I think that front 5 are going to carry a lot of ball.
Yeah, I think, like, look, Johnny Gray is not going to be standing out in the 15-metre channel calling for cross kicks. Like, Johnny Gray is, and we know this, and so is Gilcoat, and so is Schumann, and so is Zander. They want to get their hands on the ball and run into heavy contact and get Scotland over the gain line so that Finn and Stafford and Hugh Jones have got time on the ball to go and do what they do. Look, Scotland, like, I think that's the one encouraging thing is, yes, we've lost Sione. And the one thing I would say about last year's game, if you remember, Gregor picked Cam Redpath at 12. And I thought Cam did fine when it was all going well and the forwards got us front foot ball. Scotland looked like they were absolutely cruising. And, the game could have been out of sight at half time. When Italy grew into the game and they stopped Scotland, negated Scotland's forwards on the gain line, Cam found it then more difficult. So having Stafford's power at 12 could be important to get Scotland a bit of go forward. But I still think that it's not like we've picked a battering ram who's just that. Like, Stafford's shown himself plenty of times to be able to play. Think of the try that Glasgow scored at Quins a few weeks ago. And, like, Stafford was heavily, heavily involved in that. So I'm encouraged by the fact that Scotland will continue to try and play the one way. And hopefully the loss of Sione isn't sort of too keenly felt, at least this week.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the whole thing. So come on in. I put him on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot. Prediction?
Well, I mean, Alasdair, I was totally filled with confidence by Alasdair. I think, let's meet somewhere in the middle from what I said after Alasdair left us. I think Scotland by 10, but that's like, I'm throwing in that's with a late Italian try or something. I think it'll be done with 10 minutes to go.
I think 35-17 to Scotland.
And we'd all take that.
I would take that. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great game. I think it's great that Italy are competitive and we're having these conversations, and it's not just a warm-up game to get into it. We're now at a point where every game is a belter. Oh, hey, tell you what did I call 35-17? So I'm going for a full-blown 5 tries and conversions. Italy, a couple of tries, conversions, and a penalty, because I always when I do this at Edinburgh and ask them and they give me a score, I always say, oh, so you're saying they're going to miss conversions. So because I was a kicker, I always have the kicker in my mind. So 35-17, everybody kicks the goals. Big fella, great to speak to you. Looking forward to it. It's going to be interesting to see how this first weekend unfolds. You can subscribe now, £18 for the year. roll up. It's all there, but you can also go £4 for the first 4 months, and that'll get you everything you need for the Six Nations. You'll hear all from him, and we'll be back next week to pick the bones over a massive Scotland win and to get us cruising towards a Grand Slam. Fair, big fella?
I mean, let's hope it's all as rosy as that, and we're not picking through the bones of another Scotland defeat.
Not going to happen. Cheers, big man. Great to see you. Look after yourself. Six Nations time ready to kick off. Let's go for it.